you happy.
Right.
But I'm trying to figure out, like, where do I start? Because I want to, one of the things I want to get out of today is I want to have a clearer framework for how to spend my money.
Well, those 2 points that you just brought up, I think, are very related. The first, on the point of, can money make you happier? The answer is yes, but there's an asterisk next to it that we need to get to. For years, there was a big academic debate of, does more money make you happy? Some of the studies showed yes, clearly it does. Other studies showed no, it really doesn't. And the academics, the economists were like battling for decades. It's kind of been cleared up in the last couple of years, this last couple of decades, with some nuance, which is this. If you are already an unhappy person, if you're already anxious, if you're already depressed, by and large, having more money will not help you, at least that much. It might help you a little bit around the margins. If you start as an unhappy, depressed, anxious person. If you are already a happy, content, joyful, laughing person, having more money will give you a better life. So in either direction, it's just leveraging who you already were. It's not going to change you that much. It's just going to leverage who you already were. Very similar to, like, they say this about power. Like, once you gain power in politics or something, it just leverages the personality that you already had. Money is very much like that. And so it's not a panacea in the sense of, like, oh, like, if you're miserable, like, if you had more money, it's going to clear up your problems. It can make some of your problems a little bit easier to deal with. But I mean, think about it in these stark terms. Let's say you are overweight and unhappy. You hate your job and you're recently divorced and your kids won't talk to you, but you live in a mansion that has a Ferrari in the driveway and you got all kinds of fancy stuff. Is that a good life? If everything else in your life sucked, and you woke up every morning going, oh, I got to go to work today. I hate my job. I can't stand my job. I'm lonely. I'm miserable. I'm overweight. I can't sleep. I'm addicted to alcohol, whatever it might be. Of course, it's a terrible life. The house and the car don't matter at all. But you can flip that around and say, like, let's say you live in a very modest middle-class house and you drive a 10-year-old Honda Civic, but you love your job. You love your coworkers. You have a great relationship with your spouse. Your kids admire you. You have your friends over for a barbecue every Friday night. Materially, it's very modest. You have what you need. You're not impoverished. You're not homeless. You have the food that you want, the shelter that you want, but you would be an absolute maniac to choose the miserable person in the mansion versus the content, happy person in the middle-class house. If your goal is to live a good life, it's psychotic to pick one over the other.
I felt this quite starkly recently because I flew to Cape Town on my own. I've only ever been there with my girlfriend and with other friends. And the first time I've only been there a few times. I've got a house there and it's a very big house. And the first time I came was with my family. Second time it's with my girlfriend and my friends. This time I came on my own. Yeah. And I felt this deep existential feeling waking up, walking through that house alone, thinking, fuck me. Like, it was so clear to me that the point of such a thing is to fill it with people. And you say,
that's what I make this point in the book of, like, the very simple question, will a big house make you happier?
I think it will make you depressed if it's empty.
Yes.
Because that's how I felt. I was like, I'd rather be in a studio apartment alone than a big house on my own.
Right. I had a similar realization to you a couple of years ago when I took my family and I went to Maui for a vacation. And I love Maui. It's my favorite place in the world. And now I have kids. So I'm building sandcastles with my kids on the beach in Maui. And that, I remember thinking, like, this is a 10 out of 10. This is peak life for me. Building sandcastles with my kids, everyone's happy in the sun. But then I had this realization of, like, if that's a 10, playing with Legos at home on the living room floor with my kids is like a 9. Like, it's really close. Because the realization was, what I enjoy is, like, quality time with my kids. And I think a lot of the reason that people like travel is not because they like getting on an airplane and flying around the world and being jet lagged and cramped into a small hotel. What they like is uninterrupted time away from work, away from all the other stresses of everyday life. That's what they actually enjoy. That's what they like travel. It's not necessarily the location. It's like what the location is doing for you. So the question of, will a big house make you happier? It will, to the extent that it makes it easier to have your friends and family over. Because your friends and family are the ones who are actually making you happy. And so the answer can be, will a nice house make you happy? The answer can be yes, if you're using it for the right reasons. There was this article in the New York Times, this is probably 10 or 15 years ago. And the article said, 2 things happened to Julia Roberts this week. 1, she won the Academy Award. And 2, she found out her husband was cheating on her. And so the column said, pop quiz, did Julia Roberts have a good week? And it's like, you'd be a fool to say yes. It was probably the worst week of her life, I imagine.
Yeah.
But what we see from the outside was dolled up in a beautiful dress, accepting the highest honor of her career and saying like, wow, that must be an amazing. But it gets back to, once you see the full picture, you're like, nah, it's not as easy as it seems.
You say on page 23 of your book, a quote that I loved, show off the inside of your house, not the outside.
Right.
And
because the inside of your house are what your friends and your family are seeing.
Is there like a hack here? Like, is there, because you have all these like internet communities that come up with these like hacks, these other ways to live. They step outside of the matrix and they form their own little cult that are like doing it differently and not abiding by the rules of the quote unquote matrix. I very much feel like most of us are trapped in the matrix.
Yeah.
We're trapped in this like status game, competing against each other, not searching for happiness. Like, what is the hack here? How do I get out of the matrix and what does that look like?
I think if there is a formula that I lay out in the book, and I make the point that like there's no formula for how to spend money. But if I did try to make a formula for a pretty good life, and this extends way outside of money, the formula for a pretty good life is independence plus purpose. If you want to say like, how can I be a happy person? You need to be independent. You need to be able to do what you want to do, when you want to do it, with whom you want to do it with. And you need some kind of purpose that is higher than yourself. And that could be a million different things. It could be friends, it could be family, it could be career, it could be religion, whatever it might be. I think it is very difficult to imagine anyone having a good life without those two things. If your entire life and your schedule is dictated by somebody else, of you have to go to this job that you don't like, you have to have a long commute that you don't like, you have to do this when you don't want to do it, it's hard to be happy. And if you don't have any kind of purpose that you're doing it for, it's difficult to be happy. And so the idea that, to me, the best thing to spend money on is independence. And I view it as purchasing. I don't view it as saving money. I view it as purchasing independence. That's how I view it. I feel like I'm buying independence when I save. And so to me, the biggest thing that I spend my money on, and this sounds weird, but is saving. And I view that as buying independence. I view that as every dollar that I save is a little bit more independent than I was before. It's a little bit of my future that I now own and control. And if you're listening to this and you're like, look, I'm not financially independent. I have no possibility of being financially independent. Independence exists on a spectrum. And literally every dollar that you save is a little bit more independent than you were before. If you have $100 in the bank in savings, that can make it so that if you were to lose your job, you have a little bit more flexibility for rent or groceries or whatever it might be that you didn't before. If $1,000, $10,000, any amount that you have is a little bit more independent than you were before. And so when you view one of the cores of living a good life is independence, and any amount of saving money will buy you independence, I think that's a powerful observation for people. And then the purpose part is going to be different for everyone. For me right now in my life, it's being a good father. That's what I want my identity to be. That's my overarching goal in life, is to be a good dad. I think the vast majority of parents will tell you that there was no greater joy, purpose than watching their kids thrive. It can also bring a lot of sorrow and a lot of sleepless nights and a lot of anxiety and a lot of worry that comes along with it. But nothing that I've experienced or any of the other parents that I know would say that anything in their life has come before that it's been a great thing. So we got on this point because the formula is independence plus purpose. For me, the purpose is being a parent. That's not going to be true for everyone.
But you're trading independence for that.
I'm trading, it's internal independence that I'm giving up. I want to sacrifice for my kids. I want to, like, loyalty to people who deserve your loyalty is a wonderful thing. Loyalty to people who don't deserve your loyalty sucks. And so if you're giving your loyalty to a company that doesn't respect you, that sucks. That's terrible. Loyalty to people who deserve it is a very fulfilling thing. So my kids deserve my loyalty.
How did they earn that loyalty?
Just by being my kids. And there's some days where I feel like they don't appreciate it, of course. But I think that tends to be true. People get into problems when they are loyal to people or organizations or political affiliations who don't deserve the loyalty. That's when it gets dangerous.
Do you think the promise of independence and freedom has a secret, hidden, dark trade-off that people don't talk about? Because there's this culture right now of like, be your own boss and stand on your own 2 feet. And when you think about what makes humans happy, it seems to be collective things. It seems to be actually, in your case, as you're saying, dependence. Your kids depend on you. Yes. And in some ways, you depend on them. All the things that seem to be like having my friends at my house made me happier than being in the house alone.
Right.
But the public narrative is all about like optimizing for freedom, whatever that means, and really more so optimizing for independence, not depending on someone else.
Yeah.
But when you look at the people that seem to be the most unhappy, they seem to be the most independent.
Right. Because if you picture someone like living in a cabin by themselves in the middle of Montana with no one around them or whatever it might be.
No family, no pets, freelance work on a laptop on their own, in a glass box in Dubai, no big obligations, not in a church.
But back to the formula, independence plus purpose. Those people have no purpose.
Oh yeah.
So I think yes, everyone is going to be. I'm dependent on my wife, my kids. There is dependency there. But I'm choosing. I chose her as a spouse. I chose to have kids. And so I still did it on my terms. And so you're never going to be, or I think you don't want to be 100% independent in the sense that you don't rely on anyone and no one relies on you, because then you have no purpose. Mm-hmm. It's choosing who you want. I think you're not independent if you have to be loyal to a job that you hate, but you have to have it because it's the only job you got, and you have to do it. And you have to pay this exorbitant rent on an apartment that you don't even enjoy that much. Like, those are dependents on things that you don't want. But like, I want to be dependent on my family because that gives me purpose.
It's like the independence to make the choice, I guess.
To make the choice of freedom. Who you're going to be dependent on, right?
Got you. And on this earlier point, you were talking about saving, and that your favorite form of spending is saving.
Yeah.
Someone's listening now. How much money do you think they should, at a minimum, have saved?
If you try to get technical about it, I would say, what are the odds that at some point in your life, you're going to lose your job and not be able to find another job for 6 months? The odds are not bad that will happen to you at some point. Not very comfortable to think about. Maybe it's already happened to you already, but the odds that at some point that will happen are pretty good. And therefore, if you were to say, like, look, a good measure of some level of higher end independence, not a low level of independence, but like a medium level of independence is I could keep myself going for 6 months. Now, for a lot of people, that's a daunting task, and like it's okay. You're probably not going to achieve that when you're 18. It's going to take some savings to get there, but that is a level at which you can exhale to a degree that most people have never been able to do before. Of like, there's going to be some bad stuff happening in your life. It's going to be uncomfortable, but it's going to be okay. And for most people, for most of history, it was, there's bad things going to happen to you and you're not going to be okay. It's going to be very traumatic. And one of the important things there is, when you lose that job, the ability to go find a good job, even a better job, where you want, doing what you want, with the people who you like working with, is very important. If you don't have any savings, you're going to have to, by default, pick the very first job that you can come across, even if it's a terrible job in a location that you hate, doing something you hate, working with people you don't like. And so the flexibility to give yourself time to find a job that is a little bit easier and better for you, that is the purpose of savings.
And that goes back to your point about independence, which is, you want to, building up those savings is building up the independence or the freedom to make a choice about who you work with.
Right.
If the worst were to happen, you don't have to necessarily go get a job at some awful place.
Some terrible place.
You talk about jealousy in the book as well. And I was reading some stats that are quite funny stats, but they say that essentially that if you win the lottery, the probability of your neighbor going bankrupt increases.
Right. It's an amazing statistic, right?
So what's happening there?
Well, you're looking at your neighbor who won the lottery, and your neighbor probably bought a vacation house, bought a new car, sending their kids to private school, whatever it might be. And you watching that are like, I need that for myself. It's unfair that they have it and I don't. And I'm going to go do any reckless financial decision to get that. So much of what we think is normal, our definition of success, is what other people around us have. And so if you are watching your neighbor live a better life than you, then all of a sudden your definition of a good life is what they're doing, and you will do some reckless things to get it. I think that's what happens. And so one of the takeaways there is, like, be careful who you socialize with, because you're going to anchor to them as a baseline level of success and happiness. Be very careful with what you do and who you look up to and who you aspire to. I grew up in Lake Tahoe, California, and this was before tech money, when it was not a wealthy area. It is now, because all the tech money from San Francisco came up. But Tahoe in the 90s and early 2000s was just out in the woods. And, you could buy a house for nothing, and most people in town didn't have any money. And then I went to college in Los Angeles, where there is a lot of wealth. There are high expectations, and there are Lamborghinis and Rolls Royces and whatnot. And one of my observations was people were happier in Tahoe. And I think the reason why is because the definition of success in Tahoe back then was a 2-bedroom house and a pickup truck. That was success. In Los Angeles, the definition of success was a mansion and a Bentley. And so it was easier for people in Tahoe to be like, I'm good. I check the boxes. Like, look, I'm successful. Look at my tiny little house and my beat up pickup truck. That's success, right? And so that was like, be careful who you socialize with because you're going to anchor to their level of success.
I have some graphs in front of you there. I think one of them is the spectrum of financial independence.
Yeah.
Could you explain to me what that is and how that's useful to understand and why that's useful to understand?
I had this friend 10 or 20 years ago, and he said, I don't save any money because I don't see the purpose. All I'd be able to save is $100 a month. And what's that going to do for me? And since I don't think it's going to do anything for me, I might as well just go spend it. And I'm thinking, no, that's like $100 in savings. Or if you do it for a year, $1,200 in savings is $1,200 more independence than you had before. And again, not if, but when you lose your job or your car breaks down, you're going to realize how unbelievably valuable that money is. And it's not savings, it's independence that it's giving you. So the idea that independence is on a spectrum. It is not you either don't have to work or you have to work. It's not that stark, but most people think of it in those terms. Why would I try to become independent if I have no chance of not working? And the simple way to view it is every dollar that you save is a piece of your future that you own, that you control, that is yours. The flip side of that is like every dollar of debt that you have is a piece of your future that somebody else controls. It's a moment in time in the future that is not yours. It belongs to somebody else. And so I've always viewed it on a spectrum. When I was younger and much poorer, I was a big saver, even though was I independent? Like, no, of course I had to work. I had to work to pay my rent and pay my groceries, of course. But I viewed it as like every $20 that I saved, every $50 that I saved put me in a better position than I was before. And looking back on it, I don't think I could have articulated that 20 years ago, but it's what I felt. A lot of that for me back then was coming from a place of fear. I didn't have a lot of self-confidence in myself, in my career. So I was like, I need to save to prepare for when this all comes crashing down. And even though it didn't come crashing down, I'm so glad that I did it because I've had a sense of financial security and I've had a sense of independence financially since I was in my early 20s. Not because I had saved a ton, I hadn't, but any amount that I saved, I viewed as like the cushion that gave me a much higher sense of confidence that if or when things go wrong, I'm not going to be flailing. I'm going to have some cushion to fall back on.
And what is this spectrum? What are the stages of this spectrum?
So let's start at the very bottom. You're homeless, you're panhandling, reliant on the kindness of strangers. As you go up from there, you can be completely reliant on your boss in a job that you don't like. Now that's another low level. As you go up from there, you have, look, I'm relying on my job, I'm relying on my paycheck, but I probably have some opportunities. I could go work at another job. I could choose to work here. I could choose to work there. And then you go up from there. It's like, I like my job and I have some savings. So if I lost this job, I can fall back onto it from there. You can go up from there to have, you can live where you want. You can work where you want. You can change fields. You can go and you can do a completely different job. You can take 2 months off and travel if you wanted to. Like you're working your way up all the way to the highest level of financial independence, which is I don't need to work anymore. I've saved enough and I can wake up every morning and do whatever I would like to do. That's obviously an aspiration that for most people will never be reached until they're maybe in their 70s and they're retiring and they have Social Security and some other savings from there. But for most people, like a good level of independence as a good goal is enough savings so that if you lost your job, if your car broke down, if you needed to replace the roof on your house, you would be able to do it without losing that much sleep. That is a realistic level that I think almost anyone can achieve.
Based on everything you know about money, if I want to get to that highest level of complete financial freedom, what's like the 5 things that I should be thinking about at just a sort of a very simple level? Because so many people listening right now think, my goal in life isn't to become a billionaire or tens of millionaire. My goal in life is just to get to that point of freedom as soon as I can.
Yeah.
Where I can start calling the shots. And there was someone who I was speaking to the other day and said that there's this internet movement of kids who are trying to get, what do they call it? It's like they're trying to get to the point where they can retire early. Fire something.
Financial independence, retire early.
Okay, that.
Yep.
Like how do I get there?
The first thing that I think that's most important, this is the first and the last thing, this is the most important part, is that all wealth, your feeling of wealth, is what you have minus what you want. And it's so easy to ignore the latter. I talk about in the book my late grandmother-in-law, my wife's grandmother. She passed away a couple years ago. For 30 years, she lived off of nothing but $1,700 or $1,800 a month in Social Security. Not a lot of money. By most accounts, very little money. But she didn't want anything more. If she made $1,700 a month, she did not want $1,700 in $1. She was perfectly happy. She found all of her happiness working in her garden, going for walks, watching the birds, watching the sunrise, watching the sunset, talking to her friends, hanging out with her family. But if you asked her, you said, you only make $1,700 a month. You're broke. Doesn't that make you unhappy? She'd be like, what? Like, do you think having more money makes the sunset more beautiful? Do you think having more money makes going for a walk more pleasant? And I'm not saying you should live like you should be content with that amount of money. But the point is, like, she was content. She was totally content, and it was her choice. And I think she was happier financially than some billionaires. Because there's a lot of billionaires who have $1 billion, but they want 2. They have 2 billion, but they want 4. One of the things is that happiness might be the wrong word here. The word that people want is content. When you sit here and daydream about having the bigger mansion, what you're actually doing is you are imagining yourself in the mansion being content with it. You imagine yourself sitting in that house and saying, I don't want anything more than this. The feeling that we are aspiring to is just being content. Happiness is always like a 30-second emotion. It's like laughter. Like if I tell you a funny joke, you'll laugh for 30 seconds and that's over. Like very few times in life are you happy for more than a couple minutes at a time. But what you want that is like a durable emotion is being content. Just saying like, I'm good with this. I don't want anything more.
I interviewed Dr. Anna Lemke, and she's like the scientist who's most renowned for talking about and writing about dopamine.
Yeah.
And I was wondering how much the molecule dopamine dovetails into this, because I think one of the things she said to me was that dopamine is the chemical for wanting.
Yeah.
And people have, I think, mistaken it for being the pleasure.
Happiness.
Yeah, happiness hormone.
It's more. It's like you want more.
And she told me this crazy study about this rat where they removed the dopamine receptor from its brain so it couldn't produce dopamine. And then they put food 2 inches from its mouth, and the rat starved to death. Because and in that, I've always thought about that. It's like, okay, so that's what dopamine is. It's the motivation to go get, to want, to pursue. What role is dopamine playing here?
It's huge. And that's actually a good realization to be like, a lot of this is not something that you can solve on a spreadsheet. It's not something you can solve with a formula. It's chemicals in your brain. And obviously some people are going to be more susceptible to that than others. I think my grandmother-in-law just had, for whatever it was wired differently than most people. Part of that was like she was a product of the Great Depression. She grew up during the Great Depression, which probably like lowered her expectations. She never had social media and whatnot. But of course, I think some people are wired differently than others for a level of contentment. But I think there's a big thing in psychiatry where diagnosing a mental illness is sometimes more important than the treatment. If you just get a diagnosis of like, oh, you're ADHD, whatever it is, just knowing, just like the fact that you can stop questioning why am I having these thoughts, you can understand why you have those thoughts is more important than the treatment sometimes. And I think that's true here. It's easier said than done to completely control your desires, but just knowing why you're doing it and realizing that it's probably not going to give you the happiness that you want, that it's just like any addiction, that the more you chase it, the further away it's going to get, can go a big ways. And so for me, myself, there's all the time, there are moments where I'm like, oh, I should get that car. Maybe we should get a bigger house. I have those feelings daily. So the feelings don't go away, but I think I'm better now than I've been in the past at reminding myself of like, it's not going to make you happier. You know that. You've tried this before. Yeah. You've tried it before and it didn't make you happy. What is going to make you happy is spending time with your kids, having a good relationship with your wife and your own physical health, and laughing with your friends and having good times with people who you enjoy. You know that's going to make you happy and you know that's not. And I have to remind myself because it's not intuitive. And I have dopamine that tells me you should want more. So you never get over it. But I think once you've diagnosed the problem, it becomes easier at just like spotting that emotion and realizing that it's telling you a story that's probably not true.
I wonder if I could trade the addiction, because you referred to it there as being an addiction. If it's for dopamine equation, could I not shift my addiction to something more productive? And would that mean that my spending would get better? So actually, when I think about me as 18 years old and having that horrific spending problem, maybe I just shifted the thing that gave me dopamine to like building businesses or to podcasting or to writing books or to being a great dad. I don't know. Do you know?
I think it's probably true that everybody, without exception, is addicted to something. And it's just harnessing that process for whatever it might be. So some people are addicted to, my wife's addicted to gardening, let's say.
Yeah.
She couldn't care less about investing or spending money on a nice, she could not care less about her car or my car or your car. But if you have a good gardener, if you have a pretty gardener, she's all over this. So everybody's got their thing. And it's just like, can you harness that for productivity? And I think a lot of like extremely successful people are people who took their natural addiction and harnessed it for productivity into their business. And that's why they're so successful. They just became obsessed with one thing. And it's a good question of whether we can actually guide that addiction or if it's just kind of pre-wired in itself. I think it's true for myself, someone who's written books about money for 20 years, thought about money for 20 years. My mom tells a story that when I was 3, I would sit there and count pennies. I don't want to count seashells. I don't want to count cards. I don't want to count rocks. I want to count money. And so I think I've always had this disposition towards being fascinated with money.
Why?
I don't know, because I did it when I was 3. I did it before I could even think through it. But I think everyone has their little thing. It's always been fascinating to me. I don't think I'm obsessed with money. I don't think it controls my life. But I've had to go out of my way to have a healthier relationship with it. But I think it's definitely been true that the reason that I've found myself in this career is that it's always been my thing. And I think everybody has that thing in their life.
You know, people talk about addictive personalities, and I was reflecting on one of my best friends who was an alcoholic, had a problem with gambling, then had a problem with eating, then got obsessed with marathons. And he traded each one of those things for the next thing. So now he's like obsessed with health and fitness. And so when I was thinking about people that are struggling with money problems, and even my own historical struggle with money, I think I probably just traded it for something. And actually, I'm kind of happy about that because I traded it for a better addiction, which is one that was productive.
Your career?
My career and I guess doing this. I'm pretty addicted to doing this.
Right. But I think
it makes me happier than the plasma screen.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think what's true about a money addiction is that it tends to be the classic addiction of like you tell yourself, if only I get one more hit, so to speak, then I'll be satiated. Then that'll be enough. And the answer is like, no, it absolutely will not. I'll tell you like a personal thing. I don't think this is true, but it made me laugh. My wife and I bought a new house about a year ago. It's an awesome house. We love it. It's great. And my brother-in-law came over the other day. And he goes, you know, you're only going to live here for 2 years before you want to buy a bigger house. And I had to laugh because I'm like, God, like, I don't think that's true. I think we're going to live here for a while. But I know what you're saying is right. That's the natural guide towards it. That when we bought the house, it was like, oh, this is going to be so great. Can you imagine we're going to get to do this and get to do that? And we have these neighbors and whatnot. And you become accustomed to that very quickly. And then your gaze shifts a little bit higher. And you're like, yeah, but look at that house over there. That one's nicer, isn't it? That's always the natural thing. And that's dopamine at work. That is dopamine purely at work. Because the truth is our previous house was great. And our previous house used to be our dream.
And dopamine exists when there's a gap between where you are and where you want to be with something. And when that gap closes, they often refer to that as the arrival fallacy.
Yeah, right.
Which is a really kind of what you're describing.
You tell yourself, once I get there, then I'll be good. Then that's enough. And it's a fallacy because you know that's not true. As soon as you get to that, whatever that mountaintop is, there's another mountain above it. It pushes you in a way that is not easy. Like nobody should pretend that you can just go do this today, but it pushes you into appreciating what you have now and finding your joy, finding your happiness through other things that don't have the arrival fallacy. Never have, as a parent, have I said, oh, if only I had one more kid. Then that would be great. There's really no arrival fallacy for kids. You just kind of be like, these